thank you so much for joining us today, for being here. A bit about myself real quick, so you're not wondering, well, who the heck is this talking head on the screen right here? My name is Bryan Hatchell. I am the Desert Lands Organizer with Friends of the Inyo, and I've been on staff for about a year and a half now. Hard to believe, but have been loving every minute of it, working to protect public lands throughout the desert. So for those who I know, and I recognize a lot of names on this webinar today, it's great to see you. And for those who I don't know, it's great to have you here as well. Thank you for spending your time with us. And I will say this is Friends of the Inyo's first kind of stab at this virtual Zoom world as a collective with members and those interested. So we're learning together. I'll put it that way. And so forgive any hiccups or speed bumps we go through, but I think we're in store for a relatively seamless lunch hour here. So thank you again for spending your time with us, and we're gonna dive right in. So I think many of you probably know where or what Conglomerate Mesa is. For those who don't know, it's about 7,000 acres of BLM national conservation lands, with some places designated as areas of critical environmental concern. Without getting too jargony, basically what this means is that Conglomerate Mesa is a place set aside for conservation, or it's supposed to be at least. And there are all these amazing values that we'll go through today with some of these photos, but the primary objective is to really highlight some of the just incredible photography work that people have done out at Conglomerate Mesa, folks like Ken Etzel and folks like Joanne Hinn. They've been incredible allies for the campaign. So we'll jump right in and help us all understand a little bit better where exactly Conglomerate Mesa is. And this is a map that we had made quite I guess about a year ago now, that kind of gives you an idea of where Conglomerate Mesa is and how you get there. And you can see the town of Lone Pine. I believe you can see my mouse, and it's up here. We all see the town of Lone Pine. Thank you for the thumbs up. And you may know the heading south out of Lone Pine, the turnoff at the BLM Visitor Center right there to get on Highway 36. People take this road to get to Death Valley National Park all the time. And you take the route down and you kind of meander down Highway 136, and eventually you hit the town of Keeler, and obviously the Owens Lake is right there. You see it the entire way. And you'll notice that Conglomerate Mesa is basically 5 miles due east of the town of Keeler, basically as the crow flies, but a little more difficult to get to the mesa than just a straight shot. But you'll notice it's interesting. We have BLM wilderness to the north in the Inyo Mountains. We have the Malpine Mesa wilderness to the south, which is also BLM wilderness. And then we have the national park over to the east and northeast, and practically just completely to the right of it. So there's the Death Valley wilderness there, and a whole number of desert mountain ranges that sort of encompass Conglomerate Mesa. It's as if this is kind of a donut hole in the surrounding larger protected lands, or whatever sweet pastry metaphor you choose for likening Conglomerate Mesa. But as you see, Conglomerate Mesa is right here, smack dab in the middle of some amazing wilderness areas, some amazing just general desert lands, the Cerro Gordo ghost town, and so much more. And you'll see we've kind of got some backcountry campsites in here. The orangish is the conservation lands I was talking about, and it basically encompasses the entirety of the area. Now we'll get into kind of some of these more particular things at the land, but what I want to do to kind of start us off with our photos is, if you see my mouse tracking here by Keeler and down Highway 136 and through Highway 190, you end up right here at the Saline Valley Road turnoff on Highway 190. I'm sure if you're here, many of you know this spot and have used it a number of times. But for those who haven't, and for those who just enjoy a good photo, here is what it looks like. This is that road with the turnoff sign that leads you down into Saline Valley. You can sprint off to Hunter Canyon and all sorts of different areas within the California desert from here. And you can also get into Death Valley National Park. And something I love about this photo here is that you can actually see Conglomerate Mesa in the background right here. It's kind of this little area that the mouse is circulating, and it's so distinguishable, this little slope up to the mesa right here. You can see it whether you're up in the Nelson Range off of Saline Valley or you're approaching it more directly. So this is kind of the area that we will soon be zooming into and checking out here. And as you can see, there are no services available. So if you haven't been out here before, take a lot of water, multiple gallons, and come prepared. These are some rough desert roads, so whatever extra things you need for your vehicle, I do suggest mid to high clearance for a lot of these places. But yeah, the desert's unforgiving, as many of you know, so come prepared. This here, oops, there we go, is the road as you start to inch closer into Conglomerate Mesa. When you're riding down Saline Valley Road, you are more or less headed towards Death Valley National Park, albeit in the less traditional way, which is out by Father Crowley Overlook and all that. But if you turn onto Saline Valley Road, you can still get to the park, but Conglomerate Mesa, you're going to want to keep staying left. As you hit splits in the road, there's one where there's a kiosk right in the middle of a split. Hang left, and you'll kind of bump your way along towards the mesa. And there are a couple of other splits in the roads that you do need to know about, but it would be a little complicated to try and explain in full detail on a webinar. But that said, I've got written directions that I'm happy to share with you on how to get there. Or when we're allowed to congregate as groups again, you may just have to come on a Friends of the Inyo outing. We'd love to have you. So this is one of the roads in my colleague Kyle's Tacoma that we bumped along to, and yeah, we're slowly inching towards the mesa. Now, if you remember in the beginning, kind of, I showed you all of those campsites, and I actually just bumped back to it real quick. Up at the top right here, there are all these campsites, and when you're coming into Conglomerate Mesa, and you see, as I was saying earlier, if you see my mouse, you stay left rather than splitting right into the park. You hang left, and you come to a place that we've started to call Tom's Camp, after a longtime desert advocate and conservationist, Tom Budlong. It's a little bit of a tucked away secret that we like to go and set up shop at for our excursions. So right at Tom's Camp is this incredible rock formation. And now I want to take a moment to utilize the chat box. And I'm curious if anyone knows what this is, and I have a picture that zooms out and shows us more. But is anyone familiar with this structure, or have you seen it yourself? And if so, if you know, drop a line in the chat box. But if not, you'll find out in a second. Well, this is a pretty incredible, oh, there it is. That's right, Karina, it is an arch, and it's a double arch of sorts made out of conglomerate shale rock. Absolutely incredible and unique formation that folks don't know about. And I think that's there's a beauty in that. This thing is tucked away, and you got to know what you're looking for to find it. But like I said, it's a conglomerate shale type of rock, and it has 3 legs to it, which I just find so incredible. And stemming right off of this arch is what we know as the Keeler Death Valley Historic Trail, which is a trail that peters in and out of kind of existence and being well established, that back in the day used to be a historic trading route from Keeler all the way down to Death Valley National Park. And you'll see here, we do have some photos of it, and you can tell it's the most faint trail for a while, and it even disappears after this. You see here, this is when we went out with Patagonia photographer Ken Etzel, who, other than the obvious iPhone shots that I'll show and Joanne's photos here, these are all Ken Etzel's photos. So right here, Ken shot this of my colleague Alex and our good friend Claire Gallagher going on a run and kind of jogging down this historic trail. And again, it fades in and out. And something I love about this historic trail is that there's a lot of opportunity for cultural resource inventory to really better understand what's here, what's of value, and how we can communicate it to the BLM to help them understand and help the public understand why Conglomerate Mesa is such a unique and special place. And that's something that's really on my to-do list when I can get out and travel more, and when we can get volunteers with us too to go with us and explore this. I think, you know, we find the trail kind of at the top of the mesa, and then there's also part of it down in the Keeler area, but the space in between, that 5 mile, you know, connectivity between Conglomerate Mesa and Keeler, it really fades in and out. But we will keep moving along. Remember, we've parked at Tom's Camp, kind of tucked away at the backside of the mesa, and we're on that Keeler Death Valley Historic Trail now. And we're following it up to the Conglomerate Mesa Ridgeline, which very soon will open up an expanse of the mesa and sweeping Joshua trees and just classic desert ecosystems. Many liken it to wilderness-esque qualities. And this is another shot that Ken took of Alex and Claire running along the historic trail on our way up to the ridgeline. And I would say it's about 1.5 miles up to the ridgeline from Tom's Camp, maybe 400 feet of elevation gain. So it's not a strenuous hike, relatively speaking. And man, the expanse that you see going out into the mesa is incredible. But before you get there, I do want to highlight just kind of a fun little piece for me. Right before the ridgeline, there is this old bean can that is tucked into the conglomerate shale that you see around it, with what could be a bullet hole, what could be just a natural puncture from maybe a rock. With how hard the metal juts out from the hole, I like to tell myself it's a bullet hole. It just paints a cool story of miners back there in my mind. But within this, there's also this beautiful narrative of the resiliency of desert ecosystems. You see this little piece of grass, which is actually an onion growing out of the bean can. And every time we walk past, you know, we're walking up to the ridgeline at Conglomerate Mesa on the Death Valley, Keeler Death Valley Historic Trail. This is right off of it. And I just love to give, you know, check-ins every other month or so, every month, whenever I'm out there, to see how our little onion bean can friend is doing out there. I don't know if she's on today, but a great botanist, Maria Jesus, out at the Rancho Santana Botanic Garden, whenever I'm not there, she'll always kind of give me a shout and let me know how our onion is doing. So we'll keep plugging along. You know, we've made it up to the ridgeline, and don't worry, I'll have some overview shots in just a moment. But I want to share, we didn't get any photos from Ken Etzel on the historic mining history that lives at Conglomerate Mesa, but there's such a unique story here, and that bean can is just the start. You look and you see, you have these structures, again, made out of conglomerate shale that, you know, miners, the story here is in the 1800s that miners were making charcoal. We're producing charcoal by chopping down the trees in the surrounding area, less so the Joshua trees, and they were burning them to make charcoal that would then feed the Cerro Gordo mines, the silver mines up north, which, as we all know, produced the silver that arguably made LA what it is today. And so you see here, let's see if I can get my mouse on it, with the person standing next to it, my colleague Jorah. This right here, it may not look like much initially, but this is a mule cart that the Cerro Gordo charcoal miners, I guess you could call them, or producers, would load their charcoal onto this and have a mule hug it up north, haul it up north, I should say, to Cerro Gordo, where they would then use it. There are some arguments out there that, you know, the people who were making this charcoal, they were scraping by. As you could say, many miners were, but you look relative to the wild rose kilns out in Death Valley National Park, and those are so much larger, right? If you've seen that area, but you know, I would say this is easily the biggest charcoal kiln, the one on the right here, that is a Conglomerate Mesa, and then the others, they just burn right into the ground. You'll see in these next set of photos, these are some of the trees that were cut down but not used to make this charcoal by miners. But you can see on the photo in the right here, the ground here is kind of permanently blackened, and you can still find some of the charcoal, you know, here at, you know, right in between basically two high points at Conglomerate Mesa. And, you know, with that, I'll address Karina's question in the chat box. The altitude is about 7,700 feet, I'd say. And we'll show you some cool little photos here in a second. But yeah, I find that fascinating to think about, just the miners producing charcoal here in what was probably a small person operation, not many people involved and not yielding a lot of money, really just salt of the earth folks getting by and likely struggling. It just paints a fascinating story in my mind. But this right here, when you get to the ridgeline, is the overlook down into what I call the heart of Conglomerate Mesa. It opens up in just this amazing expanse of Joshua trees and conglomerate shale jutting out in all different sorts of areas. And we'll have a couple of other shots, but when Ken Etzel took this piece, it really captured kind of the nature of Conglomerate Mesa to me. You've got a little bit of that kind of orange sherbet, sunburst, desert, you know, sky going on here, all the way to where you may see, if you see my mouse, this back here is Malpine Mesa Wilderness. You can actually see it from the ridgeline. And, you know, it just really makes you feel encompassed in truly wild desert land. And often I just think about this tree too. How many things has this being seen out at this land? It's really a cool thought. But this right here, again with Ken Etzel, is a shot that he took from one of the high points. I believe he did this one with a drone, but they're kind of these spiny ridge lines that are maybe 500 feet up from, you know, from the floor of the mesa. And it reminds me of just like the back of a dinosaur or something like that, sticking up, and you can walk along it. It's crumbly rock and it's extremely sharp, but you can safely just kind of skip around on it and go exploring. It truly is a gorgeous place, and I love the backdrop that Ken was able to capture with, you know, this lens of kind of the dark desert shadows in the back there, and building up into, I believe that's the Nelson Range right there. Some of you may know about the Nelson Cabin that's tucked away back in here that folks like to visit. But this right here is a little shot of the miniature register that was put up. Geez, I want to say it was in '82. I feel like that was the earliest entry. And you may have heard me mention Tom Budlong earlier in this talk, but he dates back all the way to the '80s in this register. And I know Tom today, and we work together often, you know, on Conglomerate Mesa projects and other desert preservation. But the Sierra Club way back, not way back, but in the '80s, I'll say, put this register here, and it doesn't see a lot of entries. It's not you know, it's not a glorified peak that, you know, folks are coming out of town to go get. It's a place that just exists, and if you know where to look, maybe you'll bump around it. But I kind of like that about Conglomerate Mesa. It has a key role in our desert, you know, ecosystem. It's this puzzle piece that can't be left out when it comes to preserved desert. But in a way, it's also a little bit of a secret too. And here's another shot of just an amazing California poppy. We went out there during the big bloom we had last year, and it's absolutely stunning. Indian paintbrush, spring parsley, the California poppy, the California monkey flower, which is an extremely rare plant. We found all of these here. And this is the spring parsley right here. Cute little plant. I would say it's about maybe a little bigger than a fingernail. So you got to be looking, but that purple does tend to pop pretty well. And then here, I love this shot. Just the Indian paintbrush glowing from the sun, kind of silhouetting this Joshua tree here, and then feeding back into the front. Quite a stunning shot. And then a note on the Joshua trees. Some of you may know that Joshua trees, we're starting to lose Joshua trees at some of our lower elevation sites, like the national park. And Conglomerate Mesa, being in the range of 5,000 to 7,700 feet, is absolutely just swept with Joshua trees. There's an expanse of them across the Mesa floor and all the way up to the high points of 7,000 feet. And it creates this unique Joshua tree sanctuary, if you will, where as we're losing Joshua trees at lower elevations due to climate change and other factors, we kind of have a bit of protective peace here at Conglomerate Mesa, where they can survive at these higher elevations in the California desert. So I think it's extremely interesting. And yeah, looking at the chat box, it is fascinating that they're here, because you do see them down in the Lee Flat area when you may be out on your way to Death Valley, but this is a whole 1,000 feet higher, maybe even 1,500 feet just to the base of the mesa. And it's incredible that they're up there in such high numbers. And the regeneration rates have been very successful as far as all of my conversations have gone. So the trends are holding steady at Conglomerate Mesa as far as population and the reproduction of these trees. So I'd like to take a quick pause and open up an opportunity for questions or any additional insight. I see Sally actually had a correction. That plant wasn't California poppy, it's apricot mallow, however you say it, but awesome. That's great. But yeah, I want to open it up to questions. You can either drop them in the chat box, or you can briefly unmute yourself and just drop a line, and I'll be happy to answer it as best I can. I did see some questions about some of the threats to Conglomerate Mesa. Don't worry, we'll kind of update the campaign that some of you may be familiar with here in a moment. But just as far, we can only get so far in these conservation elements, through webinars. So there are many things I haven't touched on, but I want to, open it up now. So I'll stop talking and field questions for a couple minutes. All right. Kyle asks, what's the best time of the year to visit? As I'm sure many of you know, it's going to be blistering hot in the summer, June to August. You're going to want to be prepared for high heats in the 90s and 100s out there. But that said, some folks argue that June is actually the best time to go see the desert flowers at Conglomerate Mesa, because they are higher in elevation, from 5,000 to 7,000 feet. That's when one of our good botanist friends, Maria Jesus, loves to go out there. But if you're looking for backpacking, overnight camping, kind of more just less heat intensive adventures, I would say March and April are great out there, and even May too. And then same thing on the flip side, fall time, right before it gets too cold, is a great time to go out there. The mesa does get snow, because again, it's up there in elevation, and it will hold snow on the backside towards Tom's camp up through March, certainly. But you get out of it pretty quick once you get to the ridgeline and can see the expanse of the mesa. So basically spring and fall time, I would say those are when you'd want to go, with the understanding that you may still be at 5,000 to 7,000 feet in elevation, and it can get cold at nighttime. Patricia and Joe ask if the area is targeted for wilderness status. Currently, I wouldn't say it's targeted for wilderness status. It is allocated a wilderness inventory unit, meaning that the BLM is conducting reviews and studies at Conglomerate Mesa to understand some of those ecological conservation highlights, some of the cultural and historical highlights, whether, it's the history of our Native American friends and the Shoshone tribes and the Paiute tribes, and their history there, or if it's the mining history too. This is, it's a huge part of the Conglomerate Mesa story. So, there's all of these inventories being done to better understand what Conglomerate Mesa has to offer. But as far as it being targeted at this moment for wilderness, it is not. But, as we'll get to in a moment, it's a place that needs to be protected from some current mining threats. So the idea of wilderness is by no means off the table. I wouldn't say at the moment that it's being targeted. Well, I think we can keep move on, and then we'll have other chances for questions, of course. So if you don't get to it now, no worries. But let's keep trucking along. All right. So I've kind of alluded to some threats or some development interests at Conglomerate Mesa, and this shot that Ken took is one of the mining stakes that's out at Conglomerate Mesa. That's, what Conglomerate Mesa has been faced with for quite some time, is the interest of mineral development, specifically gold. And the type from our talks with geologists is a Carlin gold, which is this fine specular powdery type of gold that you would have to mine large masses of land in order to get any sort of commercially viable quantity. But on and off since the late 80s through the early 90s, more quiet through the 2000s, but now very relevant these days, is gold exploration interest. There actually was some drilling in the late 80s on a road that a company built into Conglomerate Mesa, but that has since been restored and revegetated. From some angles, you can see the road clearly, but if you're hiking on it, you would have no idea that you're on the road. It's more so when you take a step back. But currently there is some gold exploration interest that Friends of the Inyo and other local environmental groups are pushing back on, because for the reasons we've talked about earlier in this presentation, and for a number of other reasons that we likely won't get to today, we really believe that this place deserves permanent protection. It's this key puzzle piece in the desert that plays a significant role. You'll see here, we're kind of looking, Alex and Claire are looking at one of the canisters that the actual claim papers live in. And you see how old and rusted it is. But inside of this little can is this. And this kind of gives you an idea of what exactly the folks doing staking these claims have to file with the county. I think it's just off the shot here, but you have to go to Independence, to the courthouse, and to the clerk there, the clerk and recorder, to give them your mining claim information and the coordinates. The township and range is how they do it on BLM land to stake your claim, and then they have to pay annual fees to keep their claims active. So it's always interesting. These stakes are covered across the mesa. Some of them are kind of one-offs, that people just staking claims out of interest and wanting to be involved in that process. And then others, the majority of the mesa is basically owned by two individuals. The mining claims are, and that's where the threat stems from of gold exploration. And let's see what this next one is. Well, so we'll stay here for a second, and I'll describe a little more in depth some of the perceived threats at Conglomerate Mesa. Basically, a quick and dirty background is in 2018, the main claim holders at Conglomerate Mesa leased their claims to a company out in Canada called Silver Standard Resources. And Silver Standard Resources worked with the BLM to do a gold exploration project. They had to get an environmental assessment. They had to go through all of the relevant public comment processes. And what was determined by the BLM is that, okay, you can do gold exploration, but you're not allowed to build a road in there. You're not allowed to have a high amount of drills. What you can have are 7 drill sites accessed only by helicopter. And Silver Standard, went through this process with the BLM, and then eventually, right when the BLM came out and said, okay, you can have these 7 exploratory drill holes accessed only by helicopter, they left. They abandoned the project after all of that work, which is sort of head scratching, but the rumor mill says that there was a breach of social contract. That's how the company put it, which more or less means that the people of that area didn't want it to happen. They spoke out in such volume that the company did not feel right about moving forward with the project. So that's at least what they said. But maybe there's other parts about the mineral prospecting that is less than ideal. And to answer Nikki's question here, yes, the mining claims are also filed with BLM and the county. So they're all on file down at the Ridgecrest Field office, who is the BLM office that manages Conglomerate Mesa and the surrounding land. And for those interested in kind of digging into this and who owns mining claims anywhere in the country, I highly recommend you look at this website called My Land Matters. And you can go through all these different states and zoom in and see what kind of mining claims are owned, who they're by, when they were last updated. And it's just an incredible resource for understanding just how many mining claims exist in the area and how many are owned by the same people, which in the case of Conglomerate Mesa, 2 individuals own hundreds and hundreds on this landscape, which is incredibly concerning for if you want to see this place protected. And thank you, Karina, for dropping that in. I appreciate that. Karina linked it in the chat box for those curious. So I'll touch quickly while showing you this gorgeous photo of a barn owl feather. Recently, some of the I mentioned that Silver Standard Resources left after they had this approved environmental assessment. And things were relatively quiet out at Conglomerate Mesa. There weren't any companies sniffing around up until about mid-2019, where we heard about another Canadian company known as K2 Gold meeting with the county and meeting with the Ridgecrest Field office to talk about these claims and what the landscape is like, what the public thinks. And K2 Gold, we ended up finding a corporate presentation on their website that said that they wanted to do trenching out at Conglomerate Mesa with hand tools, and in hopes that this would ramp them up to submitting a new plan for gold exploration out at Conglomerate Mesa. So that has not happened. There's been no new plan for gold exploration submitted, but in the corporate presentation, they claimed to have done in February some trenching and rock sampling, and myself and my housemate went out there and we found trenches, and they were all under 5 acres in disturbance. They were done with what seemed to be a pick and a shovel. They had to hike in about 2 miles to get to the trench sites. So I say all this because it falls under what's known as casual use with the BLM. If your disturbance is under 5 acres and if you use only hand tools, then your activity is known as casual use, and you don't have to go through any permitting process. You don't have to let the BLM know. I actually notified the BLM that there were trenches out at Conglomerate Mesa, so that's why these on the ground visits are so important. But we went out there, and hopefully we'll be receiving a timeline for reclamation of those soon. But it was pretty concerning because I would say we found about 50 to 60 different rocks about the size of your fist with some flagging and metal plates tied around it, just scattered everywhere. And that was pretty concerning. And we also found some spray paint cans just like stashed in some bushes. So some pretty careless activities, if you ask me, related to the trenching and whatnot. But that's where we're at, with companies being interested in gold exploration. There is someone here. The threat is very real in my eyes. There is interest out there, and this company, K2 Gold, is really at the front of it. Whether they're going to submit a new exploration plan like the corporate presentation we found says is to be seen, but they forecast it for the year 2020. And they, if they did a new plan, it would it would make the old one for the 7 exploration drill holes by helicopter not valid anymore. And they would go through the process. And in their presentation, they want to do 40 to 50 drill holes, which is incredibly concerning. And they want to access it by the road too. So that, you know, we're monitoring that. Friends of the Inyo is at the forefront of this topic and this threat, because we kind of have 2 angles here. We need to stop any mining interest at Conglomerate Mesa. That's our perspective. And even without mining threats at this moment, we believe Conglomerate Mesa deserves that extra level of protection. So we're kind of leading this 2-pronged effort to scare away mining companies and to make sure that no new ones can show up, and that Conglomerate Mesa is preserved for, you know, for ourselves and our children and our children's children. And Margot asks, what is the period of a claim and when does it expire? Basically, you have to pay an annual fee. I believe it's $144 per mining claim you have. And each claim, if it's each claim is about 20 acres in size. And the claim can expire if you're not showing maintenance activity. You have to maintain your claims. Now, you don't have to do it every year. It could be every couple of years, just going out there with a shovel or maybe a rake of some kind and maintaining them. But that said, it's kind of in my experience, it's kind of a loose interpreted rule. But if the BLM finds that you're not maintaining your claims and you're not going out there and looking at them ever, then they can expire and defer back to the BLM, and someone can come in and you know, restake those claims. All right, and this shot's incredible right here. You see the Sierra back there, just absolutely stunning. Some of those ridge lines we were looking at earlier, you can see tiny versions of Alex and Claire, you know, scrambling along those ridge lines. And I think just the contrast here of the ridge line and then still Inyo Mountains in that second kind of terrace right there, and then the Eastern Sierra in the background. It's absolutely amazing. And I think it just captures a lot of cool, more just drastic elements that the Mesa has that when you go out there, you really feel it. So let's see, we've got about 15 minutes. So I want to kind of, you know, start wrapping it up so we can field some more questions at the end here and, you know, respect everybody's time. But this is just another great shot once you get up to the top of the ridge line. Looking down at the Mesa, and this one compared to the other overview shot really shows all the Joshua trees a little bit better. You can see just once it gets flat, they sweep out and just absolutely cover the ground. And you know, if you see my mouse again, they're everything from this little guy right here all the way to some of the larger ones that you can see just maybe a little further back. You see this one right here, and the land is just covered, and it's absolutely stunning. This is Ken Etzel's Instagram page. I just wanted to plug it real quick as a big thank you to him, because he's done a lot for promoting on his platform, Conglomerate Mesa, and sharing some of the photos we took together. When we went out there, you can see in this photo, I believe this is called a mountain shadow, and it's absolutely stunning. Don't ask me how it happens because I have no idea, but I just sat there and I marveled at it. Just this kind of funnel scope sort of thing beaming behind the mountains in the desert. So, you know, I want to say a huge thank you to Ken, because he provided the majority of these photos, but also Joanne Hinn as well, who has been just a longtime desert ally and has provided incredible photography work, whether it's Conglomerate Mesa or down the Panamint Valley. And as the sun sets on our presentation, so does it on Conglomerate Mesa, as you may imagine. Here's just an amazing shadowed golden silhouette of some Joshua trees out there. And then finally, nighttime comes. So I want to give just a sincere thank you to all of you who came out today and sat through this and you know, shared this experience with all of us. It means a lot that you set time aside to be here with us and look at these photos. I realize I've been talking a lot of the time, so I want to pause and open it up for questions or just discussion, basically to the top of the hour. So feel free to either do it through the chat box or unmute yourselves. I'll kind of facilitate, questions and whatnot if we get a bunch of people speaking over one another. But yes, major thank you for being here, and let's open it up for questions. Thank you very much. All right, let's see. I see Karina's question. I didn't initially see it after the trail runner sentence, but yes, those campsites in the first or second slide, and we can bump back to that real quick. They are on the backside of the mesa, on, I guess, what would be the eastern slope before the ridge line. So I guess they're not really, in a way, they're at the base, but you end up, when you hike up the ridge line, even further, you end up higher than the actual flat part of the mesa. So you are camping kind of right up here in the photos that I showed you, if you can see my mouse. And for those interested, I just want to plug, while we're on this map, I mentioned the 7 exploratory drill sites accessed by helicopter only, and they're in these little orange dots right here. This is where they're located. So kind of on the south end of the mesa, you'll see 2 of these are in the green, which is part of the area of critical environmental concern that lives at Conglomerate Mesa, designated for the Inyo rock daisy, which is this incredible endemic flower that lives at the mesa and grows out of the conglomerate shale rock. It's quite incredible. Right. So let's see.
Has Trump undid any laws that protect this area?
That's a great question. Not yet. So what I haven't mentioned is that Conglomerate Mesa is part of the larger Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan, which that mouthful of a plan dictates where mineral development and renewable energy development should go and what land should be conservation lands. So through that plan, Conglomerate Mesa possesses the protective designations like the ACEC and like the conservation lands. But currently the administration is looking to make amendments to this plan. It just hasn't happened. It's kind of been looming for the last 3 years. And as far as, the amendments that he may make, we're kind of in a waiting game. We're trying to stay low key so we don't highlight, that these lands have been stalled. And fingers crossed from our perspective that we have new leadership in the Department of Interior and in the administration that understands the value of protecting these places. But it hasn't happened yet. Thanks, Gary. I want to jump to one of the questions here in the chat boxes, and I see Margot's question. Admittedly, I'm not a geology expert, but what I will share about the rock out there is that it's incredibly unique in that right in the Conglomerate Mesa area, and it's not just this circle here. It encompasses basically this whole orange piece all the way down to the border of Malpais Mesa and back up through. Basically, the northern border is just south of Cerro Gordo Peak. So all of it is conglomerate shale out at the mesa. And then immediately, once you get off of the mesa, it's surrounded in this amazing limestone, desert limestone. And it's kind of, again, like a donut. It's right in the middle, conglomerate shale. Then once you bump outside the territory of the mesa, it's limestone. But that's kind of all, my understanding. But you see here in the comment box, Lynn has said that there's a stellar USGS paper on the geology of Conglomerate Mesa, and it kind of shows that, that map of the conglomerate shale being in the middle, surrounded by the limestone. So I'll make sure to send that link along for you because I think it'll explain it a lot better than I can. Patricia and Joe, yes, the recording will be posted on our website. It may live in the form of a blog. I find that that's kind of where most of our updated content goes. So give us a couple of days and, we'll kind of get this YouTube video put together and we'll upload it and share it on our website and through all of our other platforms too. All right, Margot asks, are there any threatened and endangered species? As far as plants go, yes, there are some BLM designated sensitive and threatened plants. Sensitive would be the California monkey flower. that's out there, and the Inyo rock daisy. Both of these are BLM threatened species and are actually recorded as such. We are working again with our partner, Maria Jesus, to continue to monitor out there to better understand its range, because it's in, especially the Inyo rock daisy, it's in this green ACEC here that you'll see on the map that I'm circling with my mouse. But we, the protective designation stops for it in this green. So if we can record and really show the facts that the range of rare plants like the California monkey flower and the Inyo rock daisy are dense and come down here, hopefully that'll garner some extra protection for the area. But the Joshua trees, I would say, are up there too. As far as animals and whatnot, I'm not sure the specific designation or threatened status, but the Townsend bat is, I believe, a BLM rare species that is known to kind of frequent some of the conglomerate shale caves that are out there. And there, there's everything from blue belly lizards scurrying around on the shale and conglomerate rock to mule deer migration corridors that come through. Rumor has it, I've never seen it, but some folks say that they've seen bighorn sheep in that area. But I've yet to confirm that personally, but hopefully one day I will see one out there. All right. I think that's all the questions that were in the chat box. Does anyone through the form of their microphone have any questions?
I have a question for you. My question is, are there any of those 4-inch or 6-inch white PVC claim markers on the mesa, or are they all the wooden stakes or rocks?
That's a great question. They're all wooden stakes. I would like to think I have traversed, every little section of the mesa, and I've not yet seen any PVC piping, which is nice, no plastic living out there. But yeah, they're all kind of the old school wooden stakes. And we actually found a pile of them over by the ridge line. Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions? Otherwise, we can wrap it up and I can kind of leave you with, a couple little tidbits. All righty. Well, I think that timing works great. We're 5 until 1 o'clock. Again, sincere thanks to all of you for joining us. If you are curious about ways to be involved and things you can do, I think a great way to get involved virtually is make sure you're subscribed to our Conglomerate Mesa newsletter. That's the best way to get all the updated information on things like conservation highlights, upcoming events, and the gold mining threats. So that's a great way to be involved. If you like stickers, we have plenty of those. You can put them up because a huge part of getting permanent protection for this place is demonstrating that the local folks support it. And we do have some convincing to do on the Inyo County Board when it comes to this place and protecting it from mining. So everything from stickers to staying up to date with the latest information. And better believe if K2 Gold comes around and they submit a new plan for exploration, there's going to be a comment period, and Friends of the Inyo and our members are going to come out in full force and make sure we vocalize to protect this place. So if that time comes, rest assured you're going to hear about it. All righty. I will send some follow-up information and documents like this map that you can have for your own keeping. And seriously, please reach out to me if you have any questions about Conglomerate Mesa. I can provide more detail. I will send around, some links that were mentioned in this chat. So thank you so much, and I hope all of you have a great rest of your day.